down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news, tips, and your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey, that's me. Thank you for joining me for another live episode of TOGCHAT. As always, I'm your host, Joe Edelman, and my mission is to help photographers like you to develop a solid understanding of the hows and whys behind great photographs. Before we get going, gang, as always, please do me a favor. Take a moment, tell your photography friends that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Let's get the word out. And you guys know I have a special guest tonight. Twitter, Facebook, they're the fastest way to get the word out. You can click that share button underneath the video, or you can use the link tog.chat/live. I just put it right there in the chat window for you. So go ahead, please let people know. As always, we've got a good crowd waiting here to get started from all over the world. So please, if you haven't done so already, leave me a comment. Check in, let me know where you're from. Passion Fruits here, Al's here, Pateo, Anand from Down Under, Perluigi in Italy, Steve, Carl, Annette, Nerd 45 is here. We got a lot of people. Javier, Mexico City. Thank you guys for spending another Wednesday evening with me on TOGCHAT. And hey, be sure to start posting your questions for tonight's discussion. I will be doing a Q&A, and as always, I will do my darndest to answer every one of your questions in my 90-minute, 1-hour show. And if you've been here before, that completely makes sense. So before I dive in, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the folks that I got to meet this past weekend in Austin, Texas at Precision Camera and Video. I was there for their holiday festival. Really, really awesome camera store. The place is huge. It was really hard not to spend money and get gas while I was there, but I think I survived and came out pretty good. But seriously, quite a few of my followers, quite a few of you that are here tonight managed to come out and say hello, sit through my talks. I really appreciate the support. I hope you learned something, but it was great to meet all of you and to be able to put a face to it. So let's get into it, because I know tonight that a lot of you are much more excited about my guest than you are me. So my guest tonight is the one and only Photoshop guru, Unmesh Dinda. So without any further ado, let's jump in to the interview. Unmesh, thank you so much for spending an evening chatting with me. It is great to have you here on TOGCHAT.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. As a teacher, I respect you a lot, because when I see your videos, I look at it and I find it absolutely amazing, because it comes through your videos that you really want to help your audience, and I absolutely love that.
Well, thank you so much. But I think that's probably why we have a mutual respect for each other, because obviously, when I first chatted with you, that is something that I mentioned that I see in all of your videos, and I really, really appreciate. And I think that, your viewers do too. I mean, you're up to over 700,000, almost 800,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is phenomenal. How long have you been doing your YouTube channel?
YouTube has been about 2.5 years. And
that's huge numbers for 2.5 years. So
that looks like huge numbers, but if you put into perspective the amount of videos that I've uploaded, that's not quite much, because I've uploaded as of now 436 about videos. So there was a point of time where I used to upload a video every day for a month, and then I absolutely burned out, couldn't do it.
I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure. So prior to starting your YouTube channel, how long have you been doing Photoshop and Lightroom, and was it a path in photography that led you to that?
No, it was quite the opposite. Really? Path in Photoshop led me to photography, Okay. So it was when I was 8 years old, my father was getting into DTP. I'm not sure whether today people are familiar with the term DTP, desktop publishing.
Yep.
But he was getting into it, and he was trying to get a job. And for that job, he had to get that training. So I was just 8 years old. He got the family's first computer. In that, he installed Photoshop. It was, I think, Photoshop 6.0 or 7.0, something like that.
Okay.
And he was the one who introduced me to Photoshop. And from then, I couldn't look back. And it started with fun things like changing my relatives' heads and turning painting them green, red, blue, changing their clothes and doing crazy stuff with my cousins, especially turning them to demons and stuff. And that's how it started.
Excellent. So I have to ask, and I'm going to regret asking this question, but if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am right now 22, about to be 23 in January.
My goodness, you're still a kid. But that is, that is amazing. So, folks, for those of you listening, I should let you know I've been having kind of an ongoing messaging thread with Unmesh, and the thing that I've tried to communicate to him, and I think all of you that watch his videos see this, and if you don't, I hope you will maybe pay a little bit more attention and realize it. This young man is a natural educator. I would like to think that I have a lot of passion behind my education, and I work very hard at it, and I try to learn to get better. What you are doing is just, it's incredible. And I hate to say for your age, because it's not just for your age. Honestly, your age makes me hate you just a little bit. That is just such talent that you have. Mine has taken a lot of years to develop, okay? Your talent is incredible. And indeed, obviously, the passion is there.
Thank you so much.
I truly, sincerely feel that the future holds great things for you.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to do. I've just even not started. But I have to say, one of the things about education that I love is, especially in your videos as well, and that is something that I learned from you and many other great teachers, is a great teacher is a person who wants their students to do better than them. And that is something, that's a quality which you have, and I highly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me do the one really tough question.
Okay.
Or at least maybe it's not tough, but I think some people will be very interested in this, because we all know that unfortunately in the photography world today, people like a little bit of friction. So obviously you are a master at Photoshop and Lightroom and everything Adobe, but there are some new players, especially Luminar.
Yeah.
Where do you see that coming into the mix or not coming into the mix? And do you see yourself potentially starting to add that into your grouping of tutorials?
Here's the thing. Here's what I know. I'm not going to take sides. If tomorrow, if a software comes out to be much more intuitive, can do much more stuff, I'll go ahead and use it. I'm not that kind of a person who is a fanboy. Like there are a lot of people who just love Apple no matter what happens, or just love Windows, hate other things. No, I'm more of an open stuff. So I'm open to everything. And if something better comes out, it's not like I'm gonna 100% switch to it. I might use it for the things that it's great at. I might again use Photoshop. Now, one of the things with Photoshop is it has gathered a lot of experience. Now, for a software to get that kind of an experience of decades, it's difficult to come to that level so easily. And again, it's a personal preference. If you're comfortable using Luminar, go ahead and do it. If you're comfortable using just Lightroom or Camera Raw, go ahead and do it. Every software has its own purpose, and it totally depends upon you what you're comfortable with. Now, if somebody looks at an end result, nobody's going to say it was taken with you're a photographer, you know this. Nobody's going to say, hey, that was taken with a Canon. Oh, that was taken with an Olympus, or that was edited in Photoshop or Luminar. The end result is something which matters, and that's it. And nobody should be bothered about which software they're using.
I'm so glad that was your answer. Thank you. I cannot tell you how often I'm getting the question now. It's like, are you going to abandon Photoshop? Are you, going to go with Luminar? I'm finding things in Luminar that I really like. I think it's got a tremendous amount of potential, but it's just like cameras, as you mentioned. There's no perfect camera. Obviously, I'm an Olympus shooter. I love Olympus cameras, but there's no perfect camera. It's about how you use the tools. So glad to hear that. Thank you.
Exactly.
I think that's, it's kind of one of the challenges that people get into when they're trying to navigate the learning process in photography. And so that brings me back to your specialty, and that's the educational piece. So there are two things that I'm really curious about. And one is just to try and give people a little bit more background, but also a little bit more appreciation for what you do and what some of the rest of us do on YouTube. So, your videos are very concise. You are both very engaging, but you're also very encouraging, but you're also very simple in terms of giving people a workflow to understand, which I love. I can watch a 2 or 3 minute video, I'm ready to go. What I don't think people realize is what it takes to make that 2 or 3 minute videos. So
Exactly.
I am assuming, and you'll let me know, that it's not like you're, of course, going through some textbook and saying, oh, I'll do a video on this and step by step by step. If I'm a betting man, you're probably doing a lot of experimenting and playing with ideas and also failing a lot to figure out new techniques, new shortcuts. So would you share a little bit of what's involved with that? Because you do make things so simple, but I have a feeling it's not that simple.
It's behind the scenes. It's not very simple, not at all. No. So it all starts with a research, a very, very in-depth research. Sometimes the situations are that I spend 12 to 13 hours straight in Photoshop, just clicking every button, trying to find something new, something interesting for people. Now, it's not necessary that if you find something interesting, that's going to be useful to the people or what they're looking for. So I also have to read the comments. Weekly or monthly, I do a post, what do you want to learn next? Or I usually read the comments of all of my YouTube channels, all of my YouTube videos, sorry. And then I look for a pattern of what are people wanting? What are people looking for? What can people want help with? And then I go ahead and research in Photoshop. Now, sometimes there are some features that people really don't know that they want it, but they want it, right? And you got to find that. So it all starts with all these kinds of research that, all these kinds of things that you need to keep in mind while researching. And once you find something which is interesting, hey, I can do this. Then once you find that idea, then searching the images is the hardest part because you need to find an image in which that technique would work the best. So let's say I am doing a tutorial on fixing the skin tone. Now you have to find an image with skin tones gone really bad so that people can look at the difference between before and after. And to exactly show that particular technique, finding the right image is very difficult. Now, once you find the right image, I have to search and I have to think to myself, how can I make it simpler for people? What are the analogies I can use? What is it that I can use an example? How many examples should I have? What is the course outline? So I don't write a script, but I do make an outline. Okay, so I have to cover this, after that. So there's bulleted outline all the time and with all the examples. So there's not a word in my tutorial which would kill somebody's time. So the focus is always trying to make things simpler for people so that even a 6-year-old can understand. So you've already heard it. I'm not sure whether it was Einstein, but he said, like, if you cannot explain it to a 6-year-old, you have not understood it well, right? Yeah.
I agree. So, interestingly enough, you made a comment in there about finding tips and techniques that people can use, but they don't necessarily know they need them or know that they exist. One of your recent videos, which I have to admit, I'm obsessed with right now, was the 3D bump.
Yes, 3D. That's something I found by accident.
Outrageous, just completely outrageous. And I'm not going to lie, you cost me an hour of my time on one image, just clicking back and forth and trying to process in my mind exactly why I liked it, because I was obsessed with the end result. But it was one of those things I just couldn't really put my finger on. Just exactly what is it?
Exactly.
And I'm literally going back through images, which I never do, because immediately it started setting off these light bulbs of specific images where this little bump would be so amazing for this image. So yes, I totally understand. It's something that I never would have thought of, never would have considered. And if someone would have just simply described that to me, I would have been like, forget it. Like, what do I need that for? It's a gimmick.
Exactly. It's like connecting the dots, Joe. So whenever I'm searching for some things, I know in my mind I have, all right, so this is the thing which can make a 3D bump. Now, how can I use it? Now, I know about blend modes. I know there's a blend mode called soft light, which deletes everything which is 50% gray and makes things darker, which is darker than 50% gray, and makes things brighter, which is brighter than. I think I can connect both of those. And I connected, and boom, great result came in. So it's the one tip that I would like to give your audience about Photoshop is once you learn the concept, you will be the one discovering the tricks. You don't need me. Maybe I can give you a couple more tricks, but you will discover tricks yourself if you just know the concepts. It's very simple to understand. It's just basic left and right, high and low, and that's it. That's all you need to know.
And that's excellent. And gang, this is why I love this guy, because what you're hearing, it's the same kind of lesson that I give you about learning things like the inverse square law, depth of field. Once you understand how this stuff works, you don't need people like me. You're going to be able to solve your own problems, and that's outstanding. So you bullet point your videos essentially so that you get as much detail into them.
Yes, and also to make sure that I don't miss anything that might be important for the audience.
Right, it's very good. Yeah, and I've always done. I actually script mine, and I do them off the teleprompter for the very similar reason. So that I have a pet peeve when you watch a 15-minute video, and at the end of the video you realize that you've seen like 3 minutes of information, in the video. So yeah, for me, I would much rather pack things in, along the way.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that Photoshop led you to photography. And I know that you also just mentioned that, part of the challenge is, of course, finding the right images to be able to show the various techniques. So two-part question. One is, what kinds of things do you like to shoot and how much do you get to shoot? And then two, are you using any of your own images for your tutorials?
All right, I got to be honest here. I'm not a good photographer. I'm just a photographer, and that's my hobby.
That's all right.
And I just started photography like 3 years ago, not a long time. And photography is something which I do on trips if I go out, and that's not something I do professionally. I do sometimes. And when it comes to shooting, I would shoot anything. So I don't stick to a specific genre. So if I'm going to a conference, if I'm going to shoot with my friends, of course, they have all the studios built up. They have the models. So I would shoot portraits. I would go out traveling with my family, maybe trips. I would shoot landscapes. So sometimes I would shoot still life. So I'm not limited to something. But photography is not something which I can call myself great at. I'm not yet. I'm getting there, learning from people like you, but not yet such a great thing. But sometimes I use my own images because, Joe, when you have to find bad images, you cannot find more bad images than I have captured. So okay. Yeah, I have to use sometimes my own images, and sometimes, there was a recent tutorial that talks about missed focus. What to do when you have just missed focus by a hair, and how can you solve that? And in that, I remember when I was getting my first camera, it was a point and shoot. At that point of time, I remember taking a very beautiful photo of one of my classmates. I was in college back then. And I thought to myself, hey, I can really use that. I missed the eye in that. I can really bring back to life. Now that I know Photoshop, I can really do that. So I used that image in the tutorial, and it worked. So yeah, sometimes my images, other times stock images, and it works out.
Awesome. Very, very cool. So, you don't give yourself much credit as a photographer, but you're just getting started. So, give yourself a chance. But I do know from following you on social media and being connected with you on the various platforms that creativity runs both in your family and also with you. If I'm not mistaken, you play the piano quite well?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Very cool. So now was that a kind of an early passion or pursuit, or?
No, that was something which I did in school. So I was so grateful to be in a school. It was like in 6th or 7th grade, which always forced all the kids to do 100% participation in everything, skating, music, dancing, and everything. So I found myself that one day, it's a crazy story if you have time for it.
Sure.
So back then they used to have phones, remember, not touch screen, but 1 to 9 keypad, and each key had a dial tone, right? So if you pressed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 7, it was in a scale. It was in a C scale. So I discovered that, and I was just playing with it, and I played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with it, and I played national anthems with it, and my parents were surprised. Oh, he's playing music with the phone. Let's give him a keyboard. So they gifted me my first toy keyboard, and that's how it got started. So that was my, during those times, I was more inclined towards music than Photoshop, but Photoshop was like early on. It was the first thing I did. Now, no, I'm sorry. The first thing I did was drawing and sketching and painting. Then I went to Photoshop and then music.
See, so the creativity's there. Don't worry about your photography. It'll come for sure. So you recently, I guess this past year, you had the opportunity to visit the US and you did some things with Mr. Kelby. Is that correct?
Yes, I did that. And before that, I did a class in Shutterfest. So Shutterfest was my first visit to the US. And then I did Photoshop World and also did a Kelby 1 class.
Excellent. So what kind of an experience was that like doing Photoshop World?
That was amazing.
Yeah.
And the first experience was overwhelming because it was the first time. Second time I was comfortable, but the first time it was like overwhelming. And I enjoyed it a lot, and I enjoyed helping people. You know, it's a different feeling to help people in person than online because you don't get to interact. I loved it. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. See,
and all of the people I met were very, very extremely nice and courteous people. I was lucky.
Yes, I've found in my travels that when you are out and about and you meet people in person, it's much different than dealing with the YouTube trolls. So
exactly.
I saw your recent social media post about comments.
I get trolled a lot.
We all, of course, get those. And at least in person, maybe we meet them, but I don't think they're willing to behave that way in person. So
sometimes people just don't mean it. They just write it for fun as well.
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes, you know what happens when I look at it from the other side, some people just want to get attention from others in their comments, and that's why somebody posted.
Yeah. No, indeed. And I've always taken the philosophy, I mean, when you get the kind of personal attacks, if you're going to do YouTube, you obviously you just have to ignore them. You have to let it go. But when I find people being critical about a video that I've done, there's two things that I do. And unfortunately, the one takes a little bit of time, but it's often worth it. And that is, I always respond to the harshest of critics.
Wow.
And I thank them for their opinion. And, you know, depending on how they phrased it or what they may have accused me of, whatever, you know, I will explain that certainly was not my intent, but, you know, I appreciate it. And part of the reason I do that is twofold. One, I've learned that even in the most obnoxious of comments, there's sometimes a little grain of information that is worth considering. It might just be kind of a check to make sure that, hey, you're coming up to a line, and it's a line that you don't want to cross yourself. So good, that person's kind of reminding you. It's like they're perceiving this as, you know, you're about to become a commercial or whatever. Okay.
Yes, I get it.
But the other thing I find is that oftentimes when you respond politely and sincerely to the trolls, you wind up getting back a response. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't really mean to be a jerk about it. I really love your stuff.
Yeah, I have got that
like,
before.
Really? Like, I sure wouldn't have known that from that comment, but it's like,
I really get it. I've got the same results, you know?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people simply forget that there are human beings on the other side of this, you know, creating.
Exactly.
And certainly we're not creating it with any bad intentions at any point. So, it's definitely,
you know, sometimes there's exactly. Sometimes there's a lot of criticism that's very, very useful. Like recently, a lot of videos ago, I think it was 100 videos ago, somebody said, hey, you have a problem with your audio. You need to fix that. And people were speaking very in a negative way about it. And I used to think, no, it's sounding nice to me. I've tried it in all my speakers and everything is great. I've tried it in nice rooms, acoustic treated rooms. But what is wrong? Then I played it in a small room and I realized that the bass is such that with small rooms, it kind of resonates and it just doesn't feel right. Then I went ahead and fixed it. I learned something. Somebody complained about my videos. Hey, you're going too long. That's when I started scripting it and writing bulleted points so that I don't speak extra information or I don't miss anything. So a lot of times it really, really helps a lot.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. It stings, but it helps. So
yes,
that's always the challenge, is to find the little nuggets of information in there. So one other thing that I found really interesting, and that I want to get back to Photoshop. But one of the other things I learned through following you on social media, especially after your trips to the United States, and this is kind of a cultural and food thing, is that apparently in India, you don't have ranch dressing there.
Oh my God. So the news has spread. Everybody knows now.
Yes. So yes, ranch dressing is good stuff. That's good.
It's something I fell in love with, but it's something which I'm avoiding right now because I absolutely fell in love with ranch when I was in the US, and I would dip my sandwich in ranch like a tea bag in tea. And it was amazing. Everything in ranch, it was so amazing. But I returned home and I realized that I have gained 10 pounds.
Yep.
And then I checked, oh my God, I checked Google. I might be wrong. Ranch has more calories than cheese. Oh my God.
I would believe that. Yeah.
And then I had to like avoid it for a moment. And yeah.
Yes, but it is good stuff.
It is really great stuff. Yeah.
So for someone that is just starting out as a photographer, well, actually, I'm going to insert another question before I get to that.
Sure.
You frequently will see online, of course, Facebook's one of the great examples. People will post an image and it's followed by the letters SOOC or the phrase straight out of camera. And if someone challenges that person or mentions like, hey, you should process it or do this, do that, the response is, no. I like things, natural, done.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that? I have a very firm opinion, but I'm curious to hear how you look at that.
I look at it, it's a piece of art. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. It's your piece of art. And now, speaking of what is real, what is fake, just like you're having an interview with me, I was having an interview with Matt Kloskowski. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, he made a very great point, which I really think there's some substance to it. A lot of people say, okay, so you do Photoshop, that's not the real thing. Okay, if you take a lens, like let's say an 85 millimeter lens, 1.2, expensive, and you capture something at 1.2 and 85 millimeter, does your eye look at it like 85 millimeter 1.2? I mean,
not at all.
Which is real?
Yep.
You don't really know. And suppose you take a picture of something and you removed that. Maybe on the table there's a phone and you remove that phone in Photoshop, or you removed it in reality, you wouldn't see much of a difference. At the end of the day, it's a piece of art. You can do whatever you want with it. Now, unless you're doing photojournalism, that way you have to be careful. Otherwise, I think it's a piece of art.
Right. And interestingly enough, so I started my photography career as a photojournalist. And this, of course, was back in the film days, long before Photoshop was a thing. There is this kind of thought process that all photojournalism, and especially in the film days, I realize we've had situations now in the digital world where photographers have cheated and gotten caught. But there was this philosophy that all photojournalism was pure and it was real and it was honest. And interestingly enough, what people routinely overlooked is that even with photojournalism, there's editing that takes place. And I don't mean color correction and contrast. I mean, when a photojournalist arrives at a scene of whatever is happening, they have a choice: take the picture here, take the picture here, take the picture back there, and they have a choice of when did they take the picture.
Yes.
So there's still editing involved.
Yes.
So we're not doing Photoshop and we're not changing things that are in the shot, hopefully, but there's still, a certain amount of editing. So, but I do agree with you very, very much on the art mentality, that when it comes to art, ultimately, it's not up for someone else to decide. I will admit, I am from the technical standpoint, I am a fan of the idea that digital files were meant to be developed. That's the idea behind a raw file. And I do think that's a very helpful process to most images. But I completely agree with you. At the end of the day, all of these photography decisions, it's up to the person that took the picture. If they're happy with it, then it doesn't really matter what I think or what anybody
if you want to
thinks.
keep it natural, keep it natural. It's great for you.
Yeah, very good. So if you were to meet at your ripe old age of 22 now, okay? If you were to meet, let's say a 16-year-old, who has been maybe stumbling onto your YouTube channel, and they're interested in photography and they're fascinated with Photoshop. What is your advice? What are you going to tell them to do? What are your words?
It's not just for a 16-year-old. It's for any ages. This would apply. And a lot of people I met in Shutterfest or Photoshop World, most were above 40. And it applies to everybody. And it is this. The most important thing in learning any art, to me personally, is interest and curiosity. If you have them, you learn it anyway, whether there's an Unmesh or not, whether there's a Joe or not, you will just learn it. If you are interested and if you're curious, you will learn it. Now, when it comes to learning Photoshop or any other thing, I would always suggest that don't, and this is unconventional. This has worked with me and this has worked with a lot of other people, and it personally works with me a lot. Don't start at point A and try to go to point Z. Don't try to go in a chronological order from start to finish. Most of the people, they look at this, this is amazing, but I have to start from the beginning. I have to learn layers. I have to learn this. I have to learn that. No, you have Google. You can just go back and forth anytime you want. Right. The most important thing is you start with the thing that interests you the most. If you're interested in compositing, just watch a compositing tutorial. And if you're not getting, what is that layer? Just Google it or watch another video. What is layer? If I'm explaining about blend modes, what is the blend mode? What is he doing there? Search blend mode. But it is very important. More important than understanding. It's more important to be interested in what you're doing. If you're interested, you'll just figure out a way. No matter how, you'll just figure it out. In my personal experience, you always figure it out.
I think that's excellent advice, and I may have to borrow that along the way. Truly, I mean, you're absolutely right. As I look back on my own experience with Photoshop, that's essentially how I did learn it. I frequently, explain to people one of the things that's both very cool and also very intimidating about Photoshop is that you can pick almost any technique or any element of it, and there's probably 20 ways that you can get it done.
Yes.
So there's no one right way for everything. So I mean, I think that's excellent. Yeah,
there are 100 ways to do things in Photoshop, and all I am promoting is jump in between. Don't just prepare to jump and then get all the clothes and do all that. No, just jump in between, and you'll find a way to get back and forth.
Yeah. So, Unmesh, I know that you have a Patreon program. And
yes, I do.
For those of you that don't know what Patreon is, I also have one too, but while we're speaking with him, I want to focus on his. Patreon is a way that, number one, you can help support your creators, but number two, also you get a little bit more access. So can you tell me a little bit in your program, what are some of the tiers and things that are available to people? Because I want to make sure people know about this and understand that it's available.
Sure. The thing is, all of our tutorials are free. And for me personally, I have not sold any classes because one of the reasons that I started my YouTube channel is because when I was learning all this Photoshop and Lightroom or whatever, and I wanted to learn. And back then I was in school, didn't have much money to afford it. And back then there was not so many tutorials on YouTube. So everywhere I searched on Google, there was a certain fee to it, and there was a certain charge to it, and that's absolutely fine. That's not an issue. I think every teacher should be paid their worth. But for an up-and-coming student who wants to learn, it was very difficult. So I wanted to do something for those students who really want to learn Photoshop. And I promised to myself, if I figure this out somehow, which I will because I'm interested, I'll just give it back and teach people. So all of this free stuff requires production. So right now I have 2 lights open, and I have all this camera. You know how expensive live streaming and all those cameras can get to produce videos and faster computers and stuff. So for all that stuff, I started a Patreon page. And I don't want to rationalize or differentiate between people who are just subscribing to me on my YouTube and watching my videos, because it really, really means a lot to me that you give your time to me. It really means the world to me. But I also don't want to make the Patreons left out who are supporting me on Patreon by donating or by pledging an amount every month, because they are the ones who are powering this YouTube channel and helping me, making it free for people. So for the Patreons, what I've done is there's a tier, $1 tier. So you can, anybody can pay as low as $1. And what they get is they get to join the Patreon group. There's a Patreon only Facebook group. So I'm every day there, or if I'm not every day there, I'm always there. I mean, 3 or 4 times a week. I will look at all the posts, comment on most of them, give criticisms on most of them. People can share. I can help people on that group, just on that group. Then there's a $5 tier, which most people opt for, because what I do is all of the PSDs, the finished PSDs, not the sample image. I give sample images to everybody. So if there's a student and who's willing to work hard, I want to give the sample image to them for free. I don't want to make it difficult for them. If they're willing to work hard, my full support is with you. And that's why I'm giving it for free. But if you really want some extra help, maybe with a PSD of how I have done personally, how I have worked on that image, with instructions written on the layers and all of that stuff. If you pay $5, if somebody pledges $5, for all the tutorials and for most of them, you will get a PSD. Some assets, some PSDs for $5. And you also get the group thing and all of the thing. And people can message me as well. Anybody can message me on Patreon. And then there is $10. For $10, I give all those benefits and the opportunity for people to, for me to help them. And along with that, I also mention them at the end of the video. So at the end of the video, I say, like, I would like to thank the sponsors who make this show possible, because if it was possible, I would mention all of the 200, 300 Patreons, but it's just not possible due to time. So I mentioned the ones who pledged $10, and then there's $25 who get to personally ask me questions through email. They send me their image, or maybe I'll sometimes 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I'll work on their image and show them, okay, this is what you have to do, and so on and so forth. That's how the tires are.
Well, there you go, folks. So it's an opportunity for you to not only help support, but also to interact and get even more tutoring with Photoshop. So, Unmesh, I can't thank you enough. I really am a fan. So I sincerely appreciate all of your kind words about me, but I have to tell you, I'll go ahead and I'll be the old guy in the room for a minute. Young man, you have no idea of the potential that you have ahead of you. The work that you're doing is just top notch. It's incredible. Your value system in terms of how you're providing your content and who you want it to be for is outstanding. I sincerely predict many, many, many great things to come for you. And folks, one last note. When you attend these big photography conferences, when you go to, let's see, Imaging USA is coming up in January, when you go to WPPI, when you're at Photo Plus next year, when you see Sal at Shutterfest, tell these people that you want him that you want him here, okay? We got to get him over here. We got to get him to do more in-person talks. And that's how it happens. Just like I've been telling you guys, you know, when you go to your local photo retailers, tell them that you want Olympus to send me out. This is how we make it work. You've got to create the demand. So you guys love watching him on YouTube, but believe me, to see him in person, I personally am looking forward to you coming back to the US, because wherever you're going to be, I have to make it a point to be there. I really want to be able to sit down with you and chat for a little bit. This has been outstanding.
This has been amazing.
Thank you so much. I will be obviously a continuing loyal follower, and I will probably be spending some time this afternoon with that 3D bump.
Oh, wow. All the very best. And thank you so much for having me, Joe. It's been such an opportunity. And at the same time, thank you to you, the audience, for watching us. It's really a pleasure. And thank you for giving us your time. Hope this was helpful to you in some way or the other.
Unmesh, thank you so much. Awesome guy. I am blessed to know this young man. And believe me, it is hard to imagine what the future holds for him and what his potential is. He's already providing such incredible value to the photography community. It's really hard to imagine just where it can go from here. So definitely look forward to seeing him later in 2019. He's going to be back here for Shutterfest in St. Louis. And he'll be back in Orlando for Photoshop World. Right now, Nick, in India, it's like 4:30 a.m. in the morning, which is why Umesh is not going to hang out for the rest of the show. I'm sure he's probably going to go back to bed and try and get some sleep, because indeed, he's got to turn out more videos. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to handle the Q&A for the rest of the evening here. And I know there were a couple of questions that came in for him. A few of them I can answer, others I'm going to defer, and I know that he will watch this on playback tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to get him to answer some of those questions in the comments thread. So make sure you kind of, check back, and hopefully we'll be able to get those answers. But I want to dive in. We've got some good questions lined up. So there's time though, gang. I've got about 45 minutes here. So go ahead, start putting some more questions in the thread there, all right? And the ones that I have waiting for me already. So this is a tough one right out of the box, but let's deal with it. This was actually left over from last week. Tracy and I unfortunately didn't get to this one, but I didn't want to ignore this, okay? This is from John Newton, and his question is, he's been taking photos for some years, but he has no confidence in showing them. Is there a way to get more confident? So John, there is, and it's really simple, but it's also really hard. And honestly, John, the only solution is just go do it. Sometimes you have to look at the things in life that you're afraid of, and you have to kind of weigh, what are the consequences, right? What are the consequences if I do this thing that I'm afraid of? What's the worst thing that can happen? So, if you're afraid of jumping off a cliff, well, that's pretty reasonable, right? Because the jumping off the cliff part is probably not going to end well unless you're doing it with a hang glider or a parachute, okay? But showing someone a picture, or even worse yet, posting it on social media where tens, 20s, hundreds, or even thousands of people may see it, hell yeah, that's scary. But what's the worst that happens? The worst that happens is you run across some jerks, right? That's the worst that happens. For the most part, it's no different than when you meet people in person. Most people are not jerks. Most people don't try to be jerks. Most people are reasonable, right? And in fact, most people will be supportive, but not all. But honestly, John, from my own experience, from the experience of many others, from many new and young photographers that I've worked with over the years, you just have to start doing it. And don't worry about, do people like it or not? Don't get me wrong. That's a bonus, right? When you post a picture online and somebody says, oh my God, I love that, it's amazing, it's one, of course, who doesn't like when that happens? But be realistic with yourself that is a response that you need to earn. In other words, you don't just pick up a camera and take pictures and boom, that's the response. Because usually if you're getting that response too early in the process, you're getting that response from friends and relatives and people that are just trying to be supportive, but not necessarily really giving you honest and sincere responses, right? That's the kind of response that you have to earn. So you've got to be honest with yourself about your work. Do you like what you're doing? And first and foremost, John, if you like what you're doing, that's actually all that counts. It really, really is. I'm sure that when you bought that camera for the very first time, you didn't buy it. You didn't put the cash down or put the credit card down with the idea in mind that I want to impress people. No. So don't change that, because once you change that, you're going to find yourself doing things and trying to take pictures that are not what you want to do, but it's what you think people want to see from you. And that's when it becomes work. That's when the fun goes away, and that's when it becomes really, really difficult to maintain the passion in what you do. And you heard a similar thread of answers, with Unmesh in terms of just, don't worry so much about what other people think. Follow what interests you, follow your passion, and do it. But unfortunately, the solution to your problem, while it's easy, I get it, that's the obstacle you're facing. You just have to start doing it. Just show your pictures. And don't worry about what other people think. If you're happy with it, and by the way, it's worth pointing out, folks, a lot of times being happy with a picture has nothing to do, or little to do with how good is it. It has little to do with, is it perfectly exposed? Is it perfectly composed? It doesn't matter. A lot of times, what really makes a picture satisfying, what really makes a picture good, is the experience that you had taking it. And first and foremost, that's what you should be connecting with. Because as long as you can maintain that joy in your work, the passion will continue and you will continue to grow. You will continue to develop. We have so much pressure that ironically we go seeking, by showing our work online, because we want those likes, because we want the attaboys, right? That it does become, discouraging. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm every bit as guilty. You have to remind yourself, with Instagram. So you guys have heard me talk about it frequently. I'm catching up on my Instagram game. As much as I consult people on social media marketing that, early on in this YouTube/teaching venture for me, I did not put enough emphasis into Instagram because I was struggling to find a way to use Instagram to teach. And it wasn't until they came up with the ability to start adding videos and then of course the little swipes, then Instagram became a platform for me where I could teach lessons and I could show behind the scenes pictures and I could show lighting diagrams and video clips and I could actually teach on Instagram. So now I'm playing catch up. Now there are photographers that have been doing what I'm doing on Instagram for, less time than me, and they've got bigger followings. So I'm playing catch up with that. So every time I post a picture, I'm studying those numbers. I'm watching those numbers. And if a shot's not going to fly up the numbers really, really quick, I'm like, oh, gosh, must not have been that good. And then the next time I'm looking at an image, it's like, hey, is this going to get me numbers? Which is ridiculous. So believe me, I respect and I understand, as much as I'm telling you, just do it. It's hard because we want the positive feedback. Who doesn't? What human wants the negative feedback, right? But it's one of those things you just have to learn that it's part of the process. You have to learn to cope with it, and you have to learn that at the end of the day, it ultimately should not matter. So right now for me, yes, I want the numbers, but at the end of the day, that's not why I pick up a camera. And I promise you, as much as I've admitted to that, when I walk into a studio, I have a shoot tomorrow, a shoot that I'm really, really excited about. When I walk into the studio, I am not at any point in time going to be saying to myself, is this going to get me likes on Instagram? Absolutely not. I'm going to be focusing on the shoot, my subject, and what my intended goal is, period. And that's what you need to do. Okay? All right, next up. So let's see, where are we at here? Nick had a question earlier on. He said he sees reference to Lightroom and Photoshop presets all the time. Are these just the equivalent of Instagram filters? What's the point? And then I'm not going to name any names, but one person came back, and this is actually before we started the show tonight, and said, no, Lightroom and Photoshop presets are much different than Instagram filters. Instagram filters are kind of just for amateurs. And I hate to disagree with that person, but Nick, I would say that yes, Lightroom and Photoshop presets are indeed the equivalent of Instagram filters. Now, there is what I feel is a small difference, okay? So first of all, I think the reason why Instagram filters have such a bad rap is because people with iPhones and Android phones can use the Instagram filters and they don't have to know anything about photography. And indeed, what do we know? We know that most people, not all, but most people that use the Instagram filters do one click, click, boom, that's it, done. They don't actually go in and edit the settings in the filter. Now, let's flip over to the photographer side of things and the people that have spent all the money on cameras and are learning Photoshop and learning Lightroom. Unfortunately, a lot of those people buy presets from a photographer on YouTube or from one of the educational companies or whomever, and they do one click, boom, and walk away. Well, I'm sorry, folks, but doing that is exactly the same as an Instagram filter. So to say that they're different is ridiculous. They're not different. Here's what a preset is intended to be, Nick. A preset is basically, essentially the equivalent of remembering your settings. That's really all it is. It's your custom settings, and you use that as your starting point. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody else's custom setting. That's cool. But here's the example. You guys all know my buddy Manny Ortiz. Manny has a set of presets that he sells that are kind of his secret sauce, right? And that's awesome. And they're great. Manny's awesome. His presets are awesome. But you gotta realize, you're not just gonna pick up a picture and take Manny's preset and go click and boom! Your pictures are gonna be as good as Manny's. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. No different than a few minutes ago, you heard Umesh talk about the fact that sometimes it takes him hours and hours and hours to find just the perfect image to be able to work on a technique. And I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have had the experience where you've watched one of his videos or one of Aaron Nace's at Florence or one of Scott Kelby's videos, and then you've pulled up one of your images and you've tried to do the exact same technique and you followed all the steps and you were careful, you went back and you checked and you followed them all correctly, and yet your result did not look nearly as good as their result. That's because it's not as simple as just saying click, boom, there it is. Presets are your starting point. They basically are taking your settings, getting you in the ballpark for where you like to be, and then you're going to adjust from there. Perfect example, when I do black and white, I have a preset. It's my own preset. I've put it together in Nick Silver Effects with all the settings that I like that makes the final image look very much like Tri-X film in terms of the contrast range, in terms of how it handles the midtones, and it does add grain, but not quite as much as we would get back in the day with Tri-X. It's kind of a slightly softer, more new millennial version of Tri-X grain. Anytime I'm making a black and white image, that's my first click is to hit that preset, but even then, on an image by image basis, I am going to manipulate that, because even my own preset is not going to give me exactly the result that I want every single time I apply it. It's a starting point. It's like remembering my settings and then going from there. So, Nick, I hope that's what you were looking for. But yeah, essentially, they're exactly the same thing, because all of those Instagram filters, you can manipulate, the brightness, the contrast, you can lower the opacity on them, all that stuff. So they're really no different than presets. Same idea, okay? Ken Vincent. So this was a question that he actually put in for Umesh, but I want to at least touch base on this, and then hopefully when Umesh watches the playback, we can get him to comment a little bit from the Photoshop side. So I'm not going to address the Photoshop side. I'm going to address the shooting side of this question. So Ken asks, most of his portraits are shot in mixed light in commercial locations, i.e., I'm using this example, office building, fluorescent lights overhead, daylight coming in through the window, right? So, we've got that ugly green fluorescent light, and then we've got blue daylight coming through the windows. That's a kind of a perfect example of that, all right? He goes on to say that lots of times he encounters fluorescent light that's bad, and then he mixes it with speed lights, and unfortunately the skin tones are a mess. And he finished with, Umesh, please help, okay? Well, I'm gonna let him weigh in on the Photoshop solutions for when you have the mess. But Ken, let me talk to you about trying to avoid the mess, right? So there's a couple options that you have. Option number one is to filter the fluorescent light. So in other words, you're going to, if you're finding that all your skin tones are going green, right? You're gonna go ahead and you're gonna filter the fluorescent light so that you can balance things with daylight. But the problem then you're gonna lose your daylight. So if you're using flash, what I used to do, and this was big time in the newspaper, business, this was how we balance things in color. You're gonna use the flash as bounce flash, or possibly if you can use some modifiers, direct, but not just harsh direct, modified through an umbrella, through a small softbox, through something. You wanna make sure that your subject is lit by that. So you want that flash to become your key light. If you can make the flash your key light, that's providing you the daylight balance. What's gonna happen then is that's also taking care of your skin tones. So if you have some daylight coming through the window, that's not gonna have a negative impact because it matches the speed light. But if you have fluorescent overhead, the only place where you're gonna get the color shift from that fluorescent is in the ambient lit areas of your image, which are going to be your background areas. So essentially, that's the way you're going to make it work, which I know I just made it sound really simple, and actually it's really not that hard. It's a very similar scenario to the way that you do the whole overpower the sun thing outside. When you're working outside and you want to overpower the sun, what do? You take a meter reading of your background, your ambient light, and you decide how much do I want to underexpose it, by a stop or by 2 stops. Then you add in your strobe, okay, and you're going to get the strobe to the aperture where you wanted it to be. Boom, now you've got your subject brighter than your background. Well, this is kind of the same thing in the sense that if you meter your ambient light and it comes in at 5.6, so then all you need to do is set your speed light up so that you're creating enough light to generate an exposure of, let's say, somewhere half a stop between 5.6 and 8, or all the way to f8, 1 full stop. Now you're underexposing that ambient slightly, which is also going to make your subject pop. And then if you're using bounce flash or using softbox modified, boom, that's providing the color temperature that is hitting your subject's face, eliminates the crazy ambient light. So essentially it's the same kind of technique. I prefer that to filtering everything. Because when you're filtering everything, you've got to deal with every light source that's in place, and that's not always possible. It can kind of really honestly become a nightmare. I don't mind if I'm getting some color shifts in the background of my shot, as long as my subject has proper skin tone. And that's the question that you asked, Nick. Okay? All right. So let's see. Andrew Herman had another one here. So, wow, okay. How about overcoming failure? How to take a disappointment and use it as a learning tool. So, honestly, Andrew, I think that's something that a photographer has to do every single time they pick up a camera. Every single time. Especially the part about using it as a learning tool, okay? Before you ever start taking pictures seriously, right? I think that it's important to understand and realize, yes, John White, that's Olympus, and it's real, okay? Before you even start taking pictures seriously, I think it's important to understand, Andrew, that failure is an extremely important part of the process, and to accept that. Now, I don't mean cavalier about it and say, oh, well, I suck, okay. No, that's not acceptable, okay? It's a matter of understanding that if you are not failing as a photographer, then you are never going to succeed. If you are not failing, then you are also not learning. If you are not failing, you are also probably kidding yourself and thinking that you are much better than you really are. Failure is simply part of the process. And by accepting that outcome, when you do fail, you're human. You're allowed a few moments of, oh my God, I suck, should I quit, whatever. We're all gonna do that. That's part of being human. But then you gotta kick yourself in the butt and say, hey, enough of that. Good photography is problem solving. I failed. So let's go back and let's step through the process and let's figure out where I failed and figure out how do I prevent that failure again in the future, right? I think that, but that's a process, by the way, it never stops. It never stops. You guys have seen my video about work the shot. You've heard me talk about working the shot. Every time I do a beauty shot, when I get to the point where I'm thinking, this is it, I love it, it looks great, I keep going, I keep tweaking, I keep pushing, I keep changing, until it sucks, until I look at it and it's like, oh God, I've ruined it. Because now I know I've exhausted my ideas and my potential ideas. I never stop with the first shot. In fact, I, as a rule, assume that the first shot is not that good. But it's a starting point. And then from there, once I have that first shot, the shot that I could live with, it was the one that was in my mind, it was the idea that I had, then I'm gonna keep pushing, I'm gonna keep tweaking, I'm gonna keep manipulating, and I'm gonna add stuff, I'm gonna subtract stuff, I'm gonna try a fan, take the fan away, mess up the hair, not mess up the hair. But I'm gonna keep pushing until I get to the point where I'm looking at it and saying, yeah, you have pretty much just created a hot mess. Now I'm done. And then I know that in that range, I've got the shot. So that failure aspect is really, really, really important, okay? Robert Duval, do modeling firms expect photos from prospective models to have retouching, or do they want to see what the model's skin looks like unaltered? So Robert, let me answer that question in two different ways. So I'm going to give you two answers. If you ask a modeling agency, or modeling firm as you put it, they're going to tell you, no retouching, not at all. It needs to be completely natural. Of course, and that makes complete sense, because if they have the person completely retouched, well, then that's kind of false advertising when they show those photos to their clients and then the guy or the girl shows up and they don't look nearly as good as their photos, right? So that's the answer that they will give you. That is kind of the company line, so to speak. Now, in reality, is there retouching that you can do or should do for your client if they are a model and if they are putting together a modeling portfolio? The short answer, hell yes, of course. But again, you must use some restraint and you must be responsible. So as an example, your model shows up and there's a pimple right there that day. Sucks when that happens, but it happens. Retouch the pimple. That is not a physical feature that's always there. You're not altering their appearance, okay? Maybe I'm doing a bathing suit picture and I have a model and for whatever reason I want to twist her this way. The minute you twist a girl in a bra or in a bathing suit top, I don't care how skinny she is. You're gonna put a crease right here. It's gonna be a bulge that most girls will not like the way that it looks. Now, the trick to that is, gang, posing tip here, if you do that little turn and you see the bulge, if you have the girl lift up, it goes away. The problem is the minute they lift up, they tend to start to lift the shoulders up and the body language is all off. So the easier thing to do is just do that twist, and if I can't hide it with the arm, if I'm gonna see it, I will retouch out that bulge. The reason the bulge is there is not because of the twist, it's because that strap, whether it's the bra strap, whether it's a bikini strap, it's digging through a muscle. So regardless of the girl's weight, this is not a weight thing, it's simply human anatomy, it's digging through a muscle. So that type of stuff, yes. Flyaway hairs, if there's a piece of hair out of place that's really annoying and distracting, absolutely, I'm taking that out. So retouching with restraint, absolutely appropriate, something that you should do, but retouching to completely alter somebody, no. Now, Robert, just in case you're asking for one more reason, I'm going to assume and I'm going to dive ahead and give you one additional answer. When I was doing modeling portfolios for a living, if I had a shot that I loved and I wanted it to go in my portfolio, I would provide the model the version that was barely retouched, made her look her best or him his best, but I had not altered anything. And let's just say for whatever reason, I thought maybe their hip looked a little big or any number of features. Maybe they have a bump on their nose and I don't ultimately like that bump on the nose. For my website and my portfolio, absolutely, I would retouch that if it bothered me. But for theirs, it's got to be a legitimate representation. So very, very important, okay? Bryant, glad you're here, and I'm glad I got to meet you at Photo Plus. Thanks for stopping by tonight, okay? So let's see here. Can we kill and bury the term overpower the sun? Nick, I would love for that to happen. And you know what? It's not so much that we got to kill it or bury it, but let's face it, all good things in moderation, right? So William Helpley, Olympus EM1X. I have no idea what you were talking about, man. I really don't. Let's see here. Miro Slave, could you give us some videos and value information about product photography? Well, I probably won't do any videos about it. I can tell you that actually just recently, if you follow me on Instagram, see, believe me guys, follow me on Instagram because I am dumping tons of really, really great educational stuff on Instagram, especially in my stories. Recently, if you follow me there, I did a product shoot with glass jar candles. So I had some behind the scenes stuff in the Instagram story, showed the setup, all that kind of stuff. So I probably won't be doing any videos specific to that, at least not for a while, since I'm a people guy. But you know, along the way, I always like to, you know, to show stuff off. So Hawaii, did you have a super chat? I sincerely apologize, man. Let me scroll back here. I did not see a super chat come through. Hawaii Espanol, I see you saying don't forget your super chat, but I am sorry, there's no super chats that came through, and I don't see a previous post from you. So, you know, double check to make sure you actually got billed for a super chat, but I'm sorry, there isn't one, and I don't see a question. So, okay, go ahead and type it in. We still got time, so I should be able to handle that, okay? Javier, do you have any advice on studio lighting in a very low ceiling area? Javier, since we have a few minutes, type in there, how low is low? How low is the ceiling area? Let me know, okay? And then I'll give you an answer. Adam, how you doing? So, another question here. Katie Rogers had a business question. Well, we haven't done any business questions for a while, so that's good. Katie wants to know, do I have any experience working on a retainer for a client? Are there any tips or pros or cons versus continuing to work on a job by job or kind of hour by hour basis, okay? So, and Hawaii Espanol, I'm sorry, but there are no super chats in here. I've got the whole thread all the way back to 4 p.m. It's an hour before I started. There's nothing here. I'm sorry. So, you know, put your question in here again, okay? So, back to Katie's question, working on a retainer or doing a job by job. Katie, for me, it really depends on what kind of an arrangement you're able to work out with that given client in terms of how the retainer is going to work. So for those of you that don't understand the difference, a retainer is basically a way that a client can essentially budget a set amount of money because they need to worry about a budget. And basically they're going to make a commitment to you. They're going to say, okay, look, we're going to put you on that retainer. We're going to pay you $10,000 this year. And then over the course of the next 12 months, they're going to use you for a specific number of times or a specific number of hours that they are getting for that retainer amount. Sometimes that retainer is paid in advance. Sometimes it's paid out monthly. Sometimes it's paid out quarterly, etc. Again, these are all things that can be, you know, negotiated. Katie, I've done both. I've worked on retainers and had a lot of success with it. The key is this. When you're working on a job by job basis or when you're working on an hour by hour basis, it's very easy to stay in the mindset of I've got to keep track of, you know, my hours, my expenses, etc., and I've got to invoice those appropriately and invoice routinely. The thing that you need to be careful of is that when you get into a retainer scenario, it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of being detailed and also staying on top of the bookkeeping. So it's really easy to let a retainer situation get away from you. And indeed, if you have a savvy client, it's really easy to let that client take advantage of you. So I strongly encourage anyone, if they're going to work on a retainer, to make sure that they are doing their bookkeeping and doing their record keeping and even doing invoicing, even though you may not be getting paid by the invoice, but essentially sending a summary, a job summary on every single thing that you do to the client. and tracking how much is coming out of that retainer. Because frequently, gang, what happens is the client's going to commit to, let's say, $10,000 worth of services. And in exchange, what they're doing is they're negotiating with you. Well, look, we'll commit to $10,000, but we want a 10 or 20% discount on your rate. We're going to guarantee you'll make that much money, but you're going to lower your rate. And that's not a horrible thing to do. I know I always talk about don't discount your rates, right? I talk about that all the time. So I would still argue, just for the sake of language, don't agree to give the client the 10 or the 20% discount on a retainer fee. What you do is you figure out how many hours is that worth. And then what you do is you give them that many hours in addition to your rate so that you're not lowering that fee. But the biggest thing, Katie, be a really good record keeper. Give the client regular updates on how much of that retainer they have spent or exhausted. That way, everybody's always on the same page. Don't assume, right? That's the bad word, assume. Don't assume that the client is tracking it closely. All right, you should track it. Okay. So let's see here. Sita, is longer lens load the pixels from my Fuji? Sita, I apologize, and I realize it's probably a language different. I don't understand your question about the Fuji there. I'm sorry. So if maybe you could rephrase it or give me a little bit more detail. Perlugi, my favorite focal length for portraits. I like the short to mediums. So for the Olympus ecosystem, for me, it's the 45 millimeter. The 45 millimeter f1.2 is my go-to lens. That's my baby. It's almost always on one of my camera bodies. I also do like the 75 millimeter f1.8. So for you full frame shooters, remember all the micro four thirds numbers, you double them. So that's a 90 millimeter or a 150 millimeter. Back when I used that other brand, the Nikon brand, if you guys remember, I talked about it in a lot of my videos, and we talked about it here on TOGCHAT. I was a huge fan of the Tokina, a brand that you don't hear a lot, Tokina 100 millimeter f2.8. They call it the Pro D macro lens. Less than $400, sharpest lens that I have ever put on a Nikon camera. Not sharper than my Mzuiko lenses on micro four thirds, but hands down the sharpest lens I ever put on a Nikon camera. Love that lens. So those would be my portrait lens. Okay. Let's see here. Scrolling back up. Coast to coast imagery. I'm new to the whole Imaging USA thing. Are we allowed to bring cameras, or is it just cells only? Yes, I'll be there Tuesday morning for your honest session. Awesome. So number one, I'm glad you're coming. Number two, I apologize that you got to get up so damn early because I talk at like 8 o'clock in the morning. That was not my choice, right? Now, you can bring cameras. It's a photography event. There's going to be cameras everywhere. In fact, coast to coast, if you joined PPA, that means, or if you just joined PPA, that also means that you get to go to this imaging for free and you get full access. So make sure that you bring your camera gear, do some of the photo walks, get as much out of it as you can. I mean, literally, my advice to you is plan on doing very little sleep, start exercising now, get your endurance up, get ready. They have stuff that goes from insanely early in the morning to really late at night. And of course, in between all those classes and the photo walks and everything else, there's the trade show. So yeah, it's crazy. Now, for you guys that are coming to Imaging USA, number one, I hope to meet you. I am only going to be there Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning and the early part of Tuesday afternoon. So literally, I'm flying into Atlanta Monday morning. I have to attend like a speaker's kind of introduction slash, here's how you're going to do things and later in the afternoon. So I'll be wandering the trade show floor Monday afternoon. And then Tuesday morning, I speak at 8 o'clock. And I'll be on the trade show floor wandering around for like the next, 2 or 3 hours. Then I'm off to the airport and coming home. It's a really, really quick trip. But I will look forward to seeing you there. Okay? So let's see here. Ajax, you're getting to where you're going to be needing corrective glasses. You notice that I shoot with your glasses on. Is it the reason you don't adjust the diopter and shoot without your glasses? Because they don't make a diopter strong enough. Plus, when I take the camera down, I am then looking at a blurry image. So I don't want to have to keep going back and forth. And I have no patience for, I know a lot of people you see them, they take the glasses on and off. They're up on their head. They're down here. Joel Grimes is one. He wears the split glasses, puts on. That's like way too much work for me. So I just wear the glasses all the time. And I still actually adjust the diopters on the camera so that it's like perfect, okay? So yeah, it's just a matter of getting used to it is kind of really what it comes down to. So Alfred Kitchens, any shows coming to Atlanta in the near future? The Imaging USA is going to be in Atlanta in January, okay? James Tehan, you met Frank Smith at Unique Photo? Yeah, in fact, I was really kind of bummed. They invited me to come to that event at Unique Photo, and I was already booked to go to Precision Camera in Austin last weekend, so I couldn't be in both places at the same time, but Frank is awesome. Frank actually lives not that far from me. We're both from the Allentown area, so great guy, awesome stuff. I don't know exactly what he was speaking about there. I didn't get to see, but hopefully you got to see some of his stuff from India. His stuff from India is just amazing. It's absolutely incredible. So, okay. JD Ramos, I've seen some photographer websites with the option to book clients from the site. Would that count as a contract, and what do you think about it? So this is going to upset a lot of photographers, JD Ramos, but I think they're idiots when they do that. Don't think that people are hiring you because you're a great photographer. That's what we all want to think. We all want to think people are hiring me because, my work is amazing. No. When people come to your website and they see your portfolio and they see your photographs, they either like it or they don't like it. And they make that decision very quickly, right? Think about your own, scenarios. You scroll through Instagram, it's like, wow, that's an interesting picture. Click on the profile. Your response is either, wow, or, God. And you move on. Done. Decision made. That photographer's good. That photographer sucks. That's it. Done. When people are making that decision to hire a photographer, what they really want to know is, what's it going to be like working with this person? Are they a jerk? Are they nice? Especially if we're talking weddings and even portraits. What is my experience going to be like with them? Being a photographer that photographs people, whether it's portraits, whether it's weddings, whether it's commercial work, but deals with people, it's a people business. So, and guys, I love technology. I'm all about technology. I love things on the internet. I've just spent the last month, I call it Jetsonizing my house. I've installed Amazon Alexa everywhere. I can turn off all my lights by voice. I've got the cameras at the front door, all that stuff. I love that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you need people to come to your website, fall in love with you, and then talk to you. Period. How are you going to photograph somebody when you have no relationship with them? How are you going to photograph somebody when you don't know nothing about them and they know nothing about you? What's that going to be like? You've just made your job 10 times harder if you're just going to book people blindly on a website and then show up and take pictures. And I know some people are going to say, no, we just do the booking there, but we call them afterwards. That's baloney, okay? Don't have people book on your website as a photographer. Completely honest, if you want to do a 1-hour consultation with me, you can book on my website. You wouldn't be hiring me for that 1-hour consultation if you hadn't already seen me on YouTube, if you hadn't already seen the way I teach, what I know, etc. So the idea that I don't have that relationship, I'm not putting you in front of a camera. I'm gonna, be one-on-one via a video consultation and say, okay, how can I help you? And then I'm gonna answer your questions. It's a lot different than booking photography. So I think it's an absolutely horrible idea. I discourage it entirely. And I've yet to sincerely find a photographer who can actually prove to me that they've been very successful, and I mean very successful doing that. Photography is a people business, and good photography, especially if we're talking portrait and weddings, it requires a sales process. You're not going to make real money unless you are willing to sell to people. And I don't mean, be a shyster. I don't mean do infomercials. I just mean, it's about selling. You have to connect with people on an emotional level and get them to connect with the idea of buying big prints. Otherwise, you're not making money because that's where your markup is. It's in the big prints, okay? GNAP, have you ever used Topaz AI gigapixels? Do I think that it's a good alternative to upgrading to a high megapixel camera? GNAP, I'm not going to lie to you. Not if I've not used it. I have no idea what the hell it is. But based on your question, I am going to assume that it's some type of an up-res type program, I would have to ask you, why in the world do you think you need that? I've had one of my images printed 8 feet wide by 6 feet tall. No fancy software involved. And, well, it's a day early, but I'll go ahead and I'll tell you guys, all right? Because I'm not supposed to make the announcement until this time tomorrow. But those of you that follow me on social media know that about a month ago, I posted that photograph of the girl with the white sunglasses and the blue balls spinning around her. And I asked for a little help if you would go and vote for that for a People's Choice Award. So the good news is I won the People's Choice Award. That photograph is going to appear, GNAP, on a billboard for a whole year. So I will get you photographs of that. In fact, I've already spoken with the billboard company who will be printing the vinyl to arrange to be able to do photographs of the vinyl before it goes up, because I want to be able to educate you people a little bit about resolution and what you see and how you process it, okay? So you're going to be able to see that, this micro 4/3 image is going to look freaking amazing on a billboard. And it doesn't need any crazy software to do it, okay? So thank you guys. Hey, thank all of you for the votes, but shh, we're not supposed to know that until tomorrow this time, okay? So anyway, let's see here. Coast to Coast. So you did join PPA a few weeks ago. That's awesome, man. So you can basically attend whatever you want to, in that respect. So, all right, so Hawaii Espanol, here's your question. Good. So recently a friend asked me to take photos for free as an act of helping him for his daughter between age 15 to 17 for team modeling competition. I'd love to help, but if I help one friend, all my friends will want that free help. I guess most or all photographers go through similar problems. Any idea of how to say no? Right now, everyone wants me in their birthday party so they can take free photos. Well, yeah, I mean, so your choice, Hawaii, is, either enjoy the free food, okay, and keep doing it, or you kind of got to start to walk away from it, right? And unfortunately, this is where you find out who your real friends are. I mean, I don't have a better answer for you. You just don't, right? You got to be honest with people and say, look, I'm trying to turn this into a business. I've got a finite amount of time in a week, as does everyone. And especially like if you have a day job and you're trying to build this photography thing on the side, you can't just be everywhere. It's not possible to do, right? It's just not humanly possible. So the best thing you can do is be honest with people and say, listen, I would love to, but unfortunately I can't do it for free. I've got to start charging. Now, I'll come to the how do you charge them in a second. But that's when you're going to find, most of your friends, hopefully if you have good friends, they're still going to invite you and say, yeah, come on, have cake, okay? The others are going to say, I get it, but go to hell. I'm not going to invite you because, you won't take my pictures. They're not your real friends, right? In terms of how do you charge and what do you charge? Well, if you are looking at working yourself down that path to become a professional photographer, and I say professional meaning charging people, making money, do the math now. Figure out what your rate needs to be, and you tell people, this is my rate. By all means, give them something free to reduce the rate. Give them a couple free prints. Any number of things, but figure out the rate now, set the rate now, because otherwise if you say, well, I'll do all that for 25 bucks. Well, then that same client's going to be coming to you 3 years, 4 years down the road and still wanting to pay 25 bucks for more work, because each time you're going to try and get a little bit more out of you. So you definitely don't want to do that. So, Adam, if rumors are true, is there any rumored features that appeal to the studio photographer on the new Olympus? You guys, I'm not an Adam. Adam, you of all people, Adam. I'm not going to talk about the rumors, gang. They're out there. In fact, yeah, I think I saw even somebody supposedly has pictures of it. You guys should know I'm an Olympus visionary. I'm under contract with the company. So just like any other camera company, that means there are NDAs that have been signed and all kind of other stuff. I've been telling you guys for quite some time that we don't get a lot of information. And I swear to you, that is the absolute truth, okay? So we'll see. I'm excited that people are excited. I'm excited that there's new stuff coming. You guys understand, next year is the 100th anniversary of Olympus as a company. So just like Nikon did a couple years ago, Olympus is, going to do a bunch of stuff to celebrate that. And I think here's what I will predict. And I don't have any definitive knowledge, but I've heard rumors. I think by the end of next year, we're going to be able to look back and say, whoa, Olympus did so much more in their anniversary year than Nikon did. I am pretty confident that's going to be the case. But that's honestly, beyond that, I have no idea. And I don't want to speculate on the rumors because the problem with the rumors, that they are just that. I'm sure by now some of that rumor information is probably fairly accurate. I don't doubt that. But the problem of it is, also, if you put a little common sense to some of those rumors, some of that rumor information is also completely ridiculous. It just makes no sense at all. So yeah, well, when the time comes, I promise, I'll be all over it, okay? Alrighty, so let's see here. Scrolling back. Oh, wait, I've got a couple more questions in here. We did the business question. Franklin has a question here. So when you're out and about with a camera, do you ever ask somebody if you could just take their picture? And if so, what's the exchange like? His tech support job is moving him to Australia for 2 years, so the primary focus of his pictures will be to remember his time in Australia. And then he also says, thanks for the travel video, and it caused him a brief moment of gasp because he picked up the 12-100 f4 Pro lens. Yeah, I have to admit, the longer I'm an Olympus shooter, the more I find myself using that lens. I mean, it's definitely not going to replace my 45mm, don't get me wrong, but yeah, that's an amazing lens. It really is. So, Franklin, in terms of approaching somebody to take a picture, if you're talking kind of like on the street photography side of things, there's two ways to approach it, really. I mean, it does come down to kind of either or. You have the street shooters that will tend to work with telephoto lenses and they shoot in a distance. So they try to be kind of stealthy about their shooting and they try to not be noticed and they kind of don't necessarily interact with their subjects, right? And then there are the street shooters that are very interactive. And in that situation, I mean, realistically, what these people do is they spend some time actually talking to their subjects, treating their subjects like human beings, interacting with their subjects. And again, for a lot of street shooters, that's really kind of why they enjoy street shooting, because the camera gives them the ability to be able to interact and to be able to experience these different people. So, Franklin, my advice is, it takes a little bit of practice, takes a little bit of effort, but I personally, I enjoy the close-up street photography, stuff done with a wide angle, stuff so that when I look at the picture, as somebody that wasn't there, when I look at the photo, I kind of feel like I am there because that wide angle lens gives me that close perspective and gives me a perspective that's very similar to what I would feel if I was in that situation, okay? So Javier did give me an answer on the ceiling here. He's saying at its lowest point, it's 2.1 meters. At its highest point, it's like 2.6 meters. So hang on a second here. I'm not gonna lie, I don't do the conversion thing well in my head. So all right, so at its highest point, he's basically at 8.5 feet at 2.6, and then the 2.1 meters is 6.8 feet, so just under 7 feet. So Javier, if it helps, my ceiling height here, let's try and reverse this here real quick. My ceiling height in this studio that I'm working in is 2.2 meters high. So it's not that high, okay? 7.5 feet is, just over 7.5 feet is what I'm dealing with here. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with lighting. I mean, obviously, I talk about it quite a bit, and it's in the video. So here, let's take you guys over to the video that's on my YouTube channel here. What I would encourage you to do, Javier, is watch the video that I'm going to find here, and I'll put the link in the chat window for you guys. Let me track this one down. It's the video on my home studio. I actually talk a bit about the low ceilings and kind of how I deal with it and all that kind of stuff in here. So watch that, and I think that will help you a little bit be able to, you know, kind of deal with that issue. Okay. All right. The Post Color blog. I cannot wait to see what Olympus comes out with next year. After trying a number of brands, I'm happy I settled with them. Question: do I use Olympus Capture for tethering or another app? I use Olympus Capture for tethering. It is hands down the fastest thing out there. So to be fair, Capture One supports Olympus RAW files, but it does not support the cameras for tethering. So the way you do it with Capture One is simply you tether with Olympus Capture, which is much faster on the download, on the image transfer than Capture One is, and then you simply set a hot folder in Capture One, and it's just as fast as if you were working connected. It literally is. It's super quick, very, very efficient. So I very much love that setup. It works great for me. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can get one or two more in here really, really quick. Annette Shively asked a question earlier. Shively, sorry, Annette. With the new updates, her old computer, it's not able to keep up. Would I have any suggestions for what to look for in a new computer? So, you know, two things, Annette. It makes sense, whether you're a Mac or a PC user, it doesn't matter. It makes sense when you're purchasing a computer at this point to get the biggest one that you possibly can. And I don't mean physically big, I mean in terms of power. So it's really two things that you're looking at. The two most important things. One is the processing speed. You definitely want a computer that's got at least 4 cores. I think the standard in the processors now is i7s and i8s. Those are you know, the most common ones that are out. And then the other thing is RAM. You want as much RAM as possible. Programs like Photoshop and that, they'll tell you that they can run on 4 gig of RAM. You try to run Photoshop on a machine with 4 gig of RAM, you are just making your life painful in the process. I personally am a believer that you don't want to run Photoshop on anything less than 16 gig of RAM. But ideally 32. Anything and everything that I'm running Photoshop or any video editing software, I'm running at least 32 gig of RAM. I want the fastest possible processor. And then in terms of hard drive size, you don't want to work under 500 gigabytes, preferably at least a terabyte or larger. But remember, you know, you can always add external drives. So just be honest with yourself about how much space you actually need on the drive at any given time. But it's worth spending a few extra pennies. Whatever computer you get, max it out now. It's going to carry you further, or carry you forward further and for a longer period of time, so that, you know, you're kind of pushing down the pike the point where you get to where you are now and your machine's slowing down and it's not keeping up with the new software, right? So that would be the answer for that. All right, last question here again, because I'm over time. Shocker. William, I see where it's advised to have black curtains in the sidewalls of a studio to stop the light bounce reflection, and white, as I see you have to use when you want it. Your thoughts? I mean, you can, but you don't have to. It's all about knowing how to control light, William. So the problem with taking that statement's not incorrect, right? That statement is, on one hand, it's very correct, but it depends on your shooting style. It depends on your lighting style. For me, you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, and I talk about it in that video. I use the room as a modifier. I will frequently do, you know, bounce flash in here. I will frequently bounce off the walls, all that kind of stuff. So I am all about using the room, but that doesn't make my version the correct version. It makes it the version that works best for me. But indeed, dark walls, specifically black, they will help prevent, you know, any type of reflection from the walls if that's what you want. White walls are going to give you, you know, some bounce and some reflection. So it's all a matter of how you like to be able to light things, okay? Alexandrio, your question about backing up data, that link that I just put in the chat window, that's your answer. I'm not gonna talk about it because unfortunately I'm out of time here. But hey gang, listen, next week I have another review. And just so you guys don't think that I'm gonna be all Olympus all the time, because I told you I wouldn't be. Next week, I'm gonna have a brand ambassador from another camera company. Now, I am going to stay with Micro Four Thirds for now, but don't worry, we'll have some Nikon and some Canon and some Sony people down the road, I promise. Next week, we're going to have Photo Joseph. Joseph Lanashki, he is going to be here. He is a Panasonic, well, I guess they call them Panasonic ambassadors now. They used to call them Panasonic luminaries. So he's going to be our guest next week. I am very much looking forward to that. Gang, we are over 90 minutes. So that means you owe me like about 188 minutes, or about 190 by the time we're done here, okay? So please, thank you again for being here tonight. I'm glad that you enjoyed the interview with Unmesh. I promise you there's going to be a lot more interviews. I'm working on a whole bunch of them coming up next week. I'm really looking forward to being able to interview Photo Joseph. I have taught with him at a few events. Great guy, a lot of fun, super, super knowledgeable. And you know the drill, gang. In the meantime, please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.